This is the session 252. A dietitian talks about diet and healthy eating. Okay. Okay. Oh, and let me introduce myself. I'm a longtime ThyCa volunteer. My wife is the ThyCa survivor, 20 plus years, and I'm her caregiver. So, Carol.
Hello, my name is Carol DeFelice. I am a ThyCa volunteer also. I am a 13-year papillary thyroid cancer survivor myself. We're going to introduce Ashley Kratovil. Nope, it's Kratovil. She already told me how to pronounce it and I forgot. Ashley Kratovil. She is a registered dietitian at the Mount Sinai Hospital in New York City. She received her bachelor's degree in nutrition and completed her dietetic internship at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. She is currently completing her Master of Science in Clinical Nutrition at Rutgers University. Ashley started her career working at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, with an inpatient blood and bone marrow transplant program and oncology units. She currently works with inpatient oncology population at Mount Sinai, providing nutrition therapy for many different diseases, including thyroid cancer. Let's welcome Ashley.
Thank you so much, Carol and Miguel. As they both said, my name is Ashley, and this is my first time at ThyCa. I was just on here presenting about the low iodine diet. So if you were just watching me, now I told you I'd be talking about healthy eating. So I'm really excited to get started. And if you have any questions, please place them in the Q&A or any comments. I'm happy to go through those after. So I'll be discussing just the role of nutrition in chronic disease. We'll also review healthy eating and MyPlate. And then during this is a few nutrition and cancer myths that I'd love to chat about also. I know if anyone has ever gone on the internet, you hear all sorts of things. So I hope that I can kind of break the glass on a bunch of those. And then I'll be sharing some cooking tips. So, the latest research from the CDC is that the current US obesity prevalence from 2017 to 2018 was 42%. So that means almost half of the United States is either overweight or obese. And obesity is linked to all different types of diseases, including type 2 diabetes and heart disease. Obesity is defined as having a BMI or a body mass index of over 30, and we calculate that based on your height and your weight. And then heart disease is the leading cause of death in the US. So in heart disease, an unhealthy diet, not being physically active, or having a sedentary lifestyle, as well as overweight or obese are some risk factors. And if we really look at this, all of those risk factors are modifiable risk factors through diet and lifestyle change. And we also know that obesity is linked to common types of cancer, such as colon cancer, breast cancer, thyroid cancer, and prostate cancer. So here's a map of the prevalence of self-reported obesity in individuals over 18 years old. And this was back in 2011. So you can see that, the states in the darker blue, the highest prevalence of obesity was about 30%. And then this is last year, this is 2020. So you can see that it really climbs over 40%. And as I said before, the average is about 42% in the US. So, things have really changed over the last 10 years in diet and in Americans in the US. So what is healthy eating? What do we consider healthy eating? So it's an emphasis on a variety of fruits, vegetables, whole grains, lean protein, and low-fat dairy products that we incorporate into our body every day. And this includes limited amounts of added sugars, like sugar-sweetened beverages and juices, saturated in trans fats, sodium and cholesterol. It also includes monitoring your portion sizes and your serving sizes. So when we think about portion serving sizes, our portion sizes is how much one person eats, and the serving size is a recommended amount. And a lot of times we tend to go over that, or we double that without even realizing it. And, it's also eating a nutrient-dense foods within our budget, our personal or cultural preferences. Now I'm curious, has anyone seen this before? I don't know if I can see, but this is something from the 1940s. It was the food chart. It was called the Basic 7. So this is what they encouraged in the 1940s to eat. And group 7 on the top left corner is butter and and fortified margarine is one of the food groups. So it's pretty interesting to see how things have changed and, you know, what they used to recommend, you know, 80 years ago. So now we have something called MyPlate, and the US Department of Agriculture came out with this about 10 years ago. And it's a much simplified, easy to relate to version of how you should be eating every day. And MyPlate is broken down into 5 different categories, and it focuses on fruits, vegetables, grains, proteins, and dairy and soy alternative products. So, I mean, you really can't get easier than this when you try to think about healthy eating, but it also involves, okay, what types of fruits, what types of vegetables and proteins and grains to think about. So I'm going to go a little bit more into each of these components of MyPlate. So with fruits and vegetables, you know, we recommend at least half your plate fruits and non-starchy vegetables. And this can increase your fiber content. This can help you feel full with a meal. You know, they have phytochemicals and all different vitamins and nutrients in different fruits and vegetables. And you really want to focus on half your plate filling up with different colors and different varieties. And then when we think about fresh, canned, or frozen, you know, it's all the same. The only difference between fresh and canned and frozen is with canned, there's usually an increase in sodium. So you really have to watch out for that. You know, buy low sodium cans or rinse your vegetables or your fruits in a colander after you've opened the can. But fresh and frozen, there's really no difference. And we encourage all of them as part of a healthy diet. So grains include pasta, wheat, rice, oats, cereals, popcorn, whole grains versus refined grains. And there's a pretty big difference. And this is where we get caught up on what grains are better for you versus those that are okay, but they're not as great for you. So whole grains is where we get the entire kernel. That's the entire grain kernel, which contain nutrients like fiber, iron, and B vitamins. And our refined grains do not contain that bran of the germ. So it goes through a milling process to remove that. And although a lot of refined grains like white breads have these vitamins added back to them, they don't contain that fiber. And that's where we get a lot of additional vitamins and minerals. And as I said before, with fruits and vegetables, fiber can help you feeling full and with digestion. And we know that all grains and carbohydrates turn into sugar in the body. And when we consume foods higher in fiber, it slows down your digestion and helps, you know, keep you from feeling full. And now I want to address the question that I'm sure every single person has and everyone's looked up or heard about: does sugar feed cancer? Well, the bottom line is no, it does not directly feed cancer. So I want you to take that away with you, is sugar does not directly feed cancer. You know, when we think about carbohydrates, as I said, everything turns into sugar in our body, no matter where we get it from, whether it be fruit juices and candies or whole grain pastas and fruits and vegetables, it's all going to turn into sugar. And our body uses that sugar for energy, and that also includes cancer cells. So we don't get to choose which cells in our body are going to use that sugar for energy. And there is no research that shows eating sugar will cause cancer, but there is a link between eating sugar and overweight and obesity and cancer due to excess body fat or weight gain, overeating. So, you know, reducing added sugars and consuming nutrient-dense foods like complex carbohydrates can reduce the rate of obesity and the incidence of obesity and overweight, which then in turn can, you know, reduce your risk of cancers. And, you know, one thing I want to say is a lot of patients will tell me, you know, I work in oncology, and they say, well, I don't want to drink this right now or eat that right now because sugar feeds cancer, and they're going through treatment. And I tell them, well, what do you mean by sugar feeds cancer? What have you heard? And I'll say, your body needs energy right now. It needs the calories, it needs the protein. And when you choose to limit yourself, you might even be doing your body more harm than good. So I really encourage patients to talk to their providers and talk to a dietitian who knows this. And, you know, drinking an ensure that does have a lot of sugar in it is something that your body might need during, you know, treatment when you're going through chemotherapy or surgery and things like that. So, you know, really think about where you're getting your food from. And when you're a healthy individual, you want to focus on those complex carbs and fruits and vegetables and lean meats and proteins. So sugar does not directly feed cancer, and that's the bottom line for that. And now going back to MyPlate, so protein foods, you can get protein from a lot of different sources, and this can include animal and plant sources. So meats, poultry, and fish, and some vegetarian sources include beans, lentils, nuts and seeds, soy products like tofu. Those are all okay. And, we want to focus on lean meats and poultry. So low fat options, limit your consumption of red and processed meats, like deli meats, bacon, ham, things like that. Those all have a lot of sodium, a lot of added fat to them. And then you also want to focus on baked over fried foods. So dairy and soy substitutes, we recommend focusing on low fat or fat-free options. And this can include milk, yogurt, cheese, some soy-based milk and yogurts. Almond and coconut milk and oat milk are great substitutes, but they really don't have that good protein like a cow's milk does or soy milk. And, sometimes it's just a little bit of almonds mixed with some water. So it can be good substitutes if you aren't able to drink cow's milk or soy milk, but you're not going to meet those protein needs. So if you want to drink those, it's okay, but try to get a good protein source from another area. And as we know, dairy contains calcium and vitamin D, which can improve your bone health and prevent osteoporosis. And healthy fats. I love to say not all oils and fats are bad. So when we think about healthy fats, we think about oils, nuts, avocados, some types of fish. These types of foods contain healthy fats, which are called monounsaturated and polyunsaturated fats. And these are usually lower in saturated fatty acids and can help, reduce the bad cholesterol in your body. And when we think about butter and margarine, those contain saturated fats. I know there's probably going to be some questions on what is better, butter or margarine. So I figured I'd address this right now. So butter contains a lot of saturated fats from animal fats, which can increase your inflammation. And margarine contains similar fats to nuts and fish. They have those monounsaturated and polyunsaturated fatty acids. So those can decrease your bad cholesterol and help increase your good cholesterol. So not all margarines are good though. You really want to look at the ingredient list and make sure they don't contain any trans fats. So, it's okay in small amounts to have either butter or margarine, but I have had some patients tell me that, margarine's bad. They've heard it's not a good source of fat and it's worse for you than butter. But, if you really think about it, margarine has those healthy fats. So it's okay to eat both in moderation. And it also depends on if you have other diseases like heart disease, to kind of think about those, what's the best option for you. And then also foods like salmon contain high levels of omega-3 fatty acids, which can help reduce inflammation in the body. So a lot of these high fat foods are actually good for you, but you really want to focus on eating them in moderation. And when we think about whole versus processed foods, so a lot of patients say, what are whole foods? Why are they different from processed foods? And what does whole foods mean? Is it just an apple or an orange, things that are not touched? So processed foods can be things like the picture I have here, a hamburger, French fries, but a processed food can also be ground meats or oat flour, anything processed is, something that's changed its shape or its flavor. And when we think about ultra processed foods, those are things that are typically lower in nutrients and fiber, like the hamburger, the French fries, or a donut. And that it can include sugar sweetened beverages like sodas and juices, sweets like cookies, cakes, and pastries. Even some crackers and chips are ultra processed. They have a lot more saturated fats in them. Breakfast cereals. I know this is a big topic, especially with kids, and you go to the store and they want all the bright colored cereals, but those usually have a lot of more added sugar than other whole grain cereals do. Lunch meats, like deli meats, are ultra processed foods. They contain a lot of sodium in them. And same with frozen TV dinners. There's a lot of salt to keep, preserve it, and same with fats. As I said, processed foods have a lot of added sodium and fat. And when we think about whole food versus processed food. So an apple versus an apple pie. Apples contain vitamins, minerals, natural sugars, and fiber. And although a slice of apple pie will have all that as well, it will also have added sugar, added fats, added sodium, and calories. But this doesn't mean we can't never have these. It's just about moderation and choosing whole foods over processed foods as you're able to. And, it's something that you can never not have a cookie, and it's just kind of watching out how much you're eating these foods. So when we think about whole versus processed foods, and, I get this question also a lot, will dietary supplements and superfoods prevent and treat cancer? So that's things like a turmeric pill with turmeric in there, or a cinnamon pill, or vitamin C, all these different things that we call superfoods or supplements. And, you really have to think about where they're coming from. So dietary supplements are not regulated by the FDA. So, they can be something that some patients need. If you follow a vegan diet, you might be deficient in things like iron or vitamin B12, because those are in a lot of animal products, animal proteins. And you might need an additional supplement like a B12 supplement or an iron supplement to, help combat that difference. But, things like a turmeric pill there's really no evidence that it's going to prevent or treat any cancer. It's better for you to add these things to your foods. I'd rather you eat a bowl of cauliflower with some turmeric added to it. That way you're getting the fiber, the whole foods, the vitamins, and the nutrients, not just from a turmeric pill. And things like kale and chia seeds, I'm sure you've seen them all over the internet as superfoods. And we know that eating those in large amounts itself will not prevent cancer. There's really lack of evidence this is going to protect against recurrence or anything. So it's better for you to add these to your foods in normal amounts. There's no need to go overboard. And some of these foods can be expensive. So if you're buying chia seeds and you're eating half a cup a day, you're probably just getting a lot of uncomfortable fiber and gastrointestinal issues from doing that, instead of just adding it to your foods here and there. So I hope that helps. And then some tips with healthy eating. So, the three things that I think about with healthy eating are limiting or avoiding added sugars, things like honey, maple syrup. Those are added sugars, even though they're natural, but they still add to the sugar content and the calorie content of your food. So it's important to think about, how much are you adding to your foods every day? And then sugar is also very tricky. It can be hidden in different names. So things like dextrose, cane sugar, fructose, that is all sugar added to your food. And you have to really look at a food label to be able to determine where those come from and if it's really in your food or not. And then in the new food label also that the USDA just came out with a few years ago, you can actually see, in fruit juice, what is added, how much sugar is added on the back of a food label. You can see how much sugar is not natural from the food itself. And then limiting saturated fats like whole milk and butter, meats like hot dogs and bacon and palm oil, opting for an olive oil or canola oil, which has a lot of those unsaturated fatty acids that are a little bit better for your body. And then limiting sodium. So if anyone was in my last talk on the low iodine diet, we talked about how iodine's in sodium, and we get a lot of sodium a day, Americans, and there's no deficiency in sodium or iodine right now because of how much sodium is added to our foods. And the recommended daily allowance is 2,300 milligrams a day, and people go way over that just on a meal alone. I like to tell patients to hide the salt shaker. If it's not in plain sight, it might be a little bit easier for you not to add to it. Use other different salt-free spices like garlic and onions, oils to get some, flavors, add lemon juice instead of salt, little tips like that. And your taste buds will get used to it. I promise. And then my last slide just has some healthy eating tips. So focus on fruits and vegetables. As I said in the beginning, a lot of this, you want to focus on half your plate fruits and vegetables, and that can be canned, frozen, or fresh fruits and vegetables. It doesn't matter. They're all the same. Just watch out for canned, to watch out for the sodium content. Make half your grains whole grains. So complex carbs include quinoa, whole grain rice, whole grain bread. Try to focus on those if you're able to. Low fat and fat-free dairy products like milk, yogurt, ice cream. I know ice cream is usually notorious for being high in fat and sugar, but that, you know, kind of moderate how much of those sweets and type things that you're eating every day. And then using the salt shaker. So salt-free condiments, onions, garlic can add so much flavor, cinnamon as well, instead of sugar, and then make small changes. So we don't expect you to, after this presentation, just go and completely change the way you're eating. And, you know, I have to change my whole diet. You know, make a small change at once. Maybe focus on using baked chicken instead of fried chicken one day and try something else the next day. So it's really about, you know, small changes, and over time, these can make a big difference. So a lot of this, as I mentioned in the beginning, is something that you can control, and we want, you know, you to be able to make your own decisions. And I hope that these tips are helpful, because a lot of what I said in the beginning with diabetes and heart disease and cancer can be prevented with diet. And I know a lot of it, it's hard to change your diet, and there's so many great resources. The USDA has MyPlate, and they have a great website that you can go on, and all these little things to help out, to help make little changes to your diet every day. And that's it for my presentation. So I would love to answer any questions you might have on diet, or things you might, you know, some things you might have on the internet. I love to go over those. So I do see we have a lot of questions in the chat box and the Q&A. Carol, do you want to go through those, or do you want me to go through those?
Yeah, we can start going through those. We got a lot.
Yeah, we have a good amount of time.
The first one, I assume a lot of goitrogenic foods, including cruciferous veggies and nuts, are they something to be avoided by patients with thyroid carcinomas? Can consumption of goitrogenic foods trigger recurrence of papillary thyroid cancer?
That's a good question. That's another nutrition and cancer myth, actually. So, you know, we just don't want you to go overboard on those. You don't have to avoid them. It's okay. There's no research that shows that high amount, you know, avoiding them completely will help to avoid a recurrence, but you just, you know, monitor how much you're eating.
And the next one, is intermittent fasting recommended for patients with papillary thyroid cancer? Does fasting kill cancer cells?
That's a good question. So with intermittent fasting, we know that it works for children and seizures, but with adults, some people have had success with weight loss on intermittent fasting. You know, there's really not much evidence going forward. You know, we don't have that long-term evidence of intermittent fasting. And, you know, I like to think of it individually. If you're going through treatment and you're already struggling with eating, if you restrict yourself to eating at a certain time, you might even be restricting how much calories and protein and nutrients you're getting. So I think, you know, it depends. If you only eat over 8 hours, you know, it's okay. But if you're really restricting to 4 hours, you might be restricting calories and protein and all good nutrients. So I think it really depends. There's not much research on this. And as long as you're not overdoing it, I think it's okay to do intermittent fasting. But with papillary cancer, thyroid cancer, I personally don't know any research itself on that specifics.
Are there any foods recommended for reducing tumor mutations?
There are no foods. So we think about, and I love these questions because, you know, what you eat is going to affect your nutrients. It's going to affect your body composition. And there's no specific food that's going to cause cancer itself. And there's no foods that you can eat to shrink a tumor or to shrink your cancer cells. So no, there is not any food. And that's, you know, why we have other medical treatments, but you can do your body a favor by changing the way that you eat and adding those healthier foods in, as I just talked about.
Best sources of calcium when addressing bone loss issues?
That's a good question. So for calcium, you can get that from dairy products. Things like kale and spinach also have small amounts of calcium. You might even need a vitamin D if you have osteoporosis to help with the absorption. But I think dairy products have a lot of good calcium sources, and even a calcium supplement would be okay if you talk to your doctor about it.
Okay, someone else has something not quite related, but many people are dealing with this, trying to avoid taking a statin for a 220 cholesterol level. He's done some research saying to limit cholesterol to about 200 and my saturated fats to 10 grams. Any guidelines in general to share?
So current research, really, there's no evidence that eating cholesterol will directly increase your blood cholesterol, actually. And this is relatively new evidence over the last few years, but we still want to make sure that you're not eating a high amount of fat. So I believe that you can have up to 7 egg yolks a week, for example, which are usually higher in fats. So I would say limit your, think about what types of fats you're eating. When I was talking about healthy fats and oils, things that are monounsaturated and polyunsaturated instead of those saturated fats like whole milks and butters, make small little switches like that to help just overall reduce the amount of saturated fat that you're getting in your body. But I don't think that there's any indications to watch how much cholesterol you're eating, because it's not going to directly change your blood cholesterol, but it's going to help with other, calories and calories that you're eating and fat that you're eating in general.
Okay, this is a good one. Which foods should be avoided that interfere with levothyroxine? Should goitrogenic foods be avoided for people without a thyroid due to cancer? I have heard that cruciferous veggies might be good for your thyroid.
So again, it's just not eating. You don't have to eliminate them and you don't have to overeat them. It's just eating them in moderation. They have other great nutrients like vitamins and minerals and fiber. So they're okay to eat.
Do you have any advice for individuals who have developed a binge eating disorder since diagnosis of medullary thyroid cancer? I guess like this person has possibly gained about 40 pounds in a 12-month period, and they're struggling, obviously.
Yeah, that's a big topic. That's in my personal experience, it's a lot more than just diet. And I think for you personally, I would recommend having a conversation with your provider. And if you have a dietitian also, it's a lot of individualized treatment with things like eating disorders and binge eating and things like that, especially with weight gain. So I don't want to give, individual advice right now, but I think having that conversation with not just about food, but see anything else that's going on with that as well.
Other than sodium, I have heard there are resins on the insides of canned foods that can leach into foods. Any truth to that? Should canned foods be limited for reasons other than sodium?
That's a good question. So when you think about cans, we want to make sure that there's no dents or cracks, because that can lead to foodborne illnesses when you open them. So I would say just basic food safety guidelines from the USDA, wash the tops of your cans, because sometimes they sit in the shelf for years on end because they don't go bad, and get some of that dust off of there. And if they have any dents or cracks, I would throw them out. But otherwise, there's no evidence that there's any indication. If a can looks okay and the date is okay, then you can still eat them.
I am an athyroid 73-year-old longtime vegan with stage 4 follicular cancer. We rarely use salt in our food. Is this a concern? Do I have any particular dietary issues regarding my cancer?
Not specifically. If you're following a vegan diet, you just want to make sure you're getting enough protein. And, you can also talk to your providers if you need additional vitamins like vitamin B12 or iron, things that aren't as, high in a vegan diet. But there's no specific foods that you need to avoid or things that you're missing out on. I think that's a good question.
Should sugar alternatives such as stevia be limited also for health reasons? I know excess consumption can cause digestive discomfort, but any other health reasons to limit?
As long as you're not overdoing it, if you add stevia or sucralose to your coffee every day, that's okay. It's overconsumption of, a lot of those sodas, and there's really no evidence that it's going to directly cause cancer or anything like that. But you do want to just watch how much you're eating.
All right, I am a 1-year post TT, not sure, total thyroidectomy.
Yeah.
Have PCOS, and over 30 foods lit up on food sensitivity tests, GI and inflammatory issues.
Yeah.
Any suggestions for thyroid and low glycemic specific meals with no top allergens? Been sticking with salmon and asparagus, but I'm sick of both, and advice would be welcome.
That's a really good question. That's a little deep for a question, I will say. I think, I don't know if you have access to a dietitian or someone that can help with that, but one thing that I mentioned in the low iodine conversation that I just had in my presentation was to write down foods that you can eat, because if you have a lot of dietary restrictions, it can be overwhelming thinking about foods that you can't eat. So I would say, think about foods that you can eat. I have a list of them ready, and go from there with recipes and snacks and meals that you can think about for those types of, if you have a lot of dietary restrictions. I wish I had a better answer, but I don't know if I can get too much into that right now.
Okay, this is kind of a long one. I'll try to read it. Does the PET scan work on cancer cells absorbing sugar? Why not limit cow's milk products? Then they note excellent research by Colin Campbell, John McDougall, supported vegan and low-fat eating. Also excellent sources is Michael Greger's Nutritional Facts, who got her lupus into remission years ago by cutting out inflammatory oils, animal products, dairy products. I don't think the US is protein deficient. The US is fiber deficient.
Mm-hmm. That's I like the end of that. A lot of people in the US do overconsume protein, and we're not eating enough fresh fruits and vegetables, which have that fiber in them. Carol, what was the first part of the question? What was the first
Well, she was asking about the PET scan. Doesn't the PET scan work on cancer cells absorbing sugar?
Yeah. Yes, that's a yes. That I will leave to your medical team if you have any specific questions on things like scans or any of those procedures. You mentioned milk. Did she mention
limiting
milk and dairy?
milk, cow's milk products?
Cow's milk can cause allergies for some people who have lactose intolerance, but otherwise it's a great source of protein and calcium and vitamin D. I don't know if there's something specific about cow's milk that you heard, if you want to put that in the chat. The only thing that I could think of, I guess, that I've heard is like antibiotics in cow's milk and all of those things that are added to milk, but there's no evidence that drinking, cow's milk will cause cancer, basically. I don't know if there's anything else about the question that I missed or that.
No, I don't think so. They were kind of referencing some of their maybe favorite references. But on the same topic, are there any advantages with organic milk and other foods?
For organic versus conventional foods?
I think so.
Okay.
Organic milk and other foods is what it says.
This is a pretty big topic, actually. So I know that, one of the biggest things about organic and conventional is much more cheaper and inexpensive. And a lot of people can't buy organic foods because of the price. So when we think about organic foods, or when we think about conventional foods, our pesticide use is regulated by the EPA and the FDA. So it's within safe amounts. And I know that it depends on each farmer and what they're feeding their cattle and all of those different factors. But, usually when we think about organic versus conventional foods, it all comes down to the nutrients in the foods. Sometimes the benefits outweigh the risks. If you can't afford organic foods and all you can do is conventional, it is much more beneficial for your body to eat those high fiber, high vitamin and mineral foods than to avoid them completely.
What is the difference between flours and whole grains? For instance, wheat flour or wheat bran versus whole grain wheat, or oat flour versus whole grain oats. Isn't flour just ground up version of the same thing, or is it something removed from the grain?
Yes. So with whole grains, you have the whole bran, the wheat bran, which has the fiber, the vitamins. And when you have things like refined flours, like white flour, the milling process takes out that fiber. So it takes out the bran, but it does add back some of like the B vitamins, but you're missing out on that fiber. So when we think about, whole wheat pasta, whole wheat rice. We recommend those because it has that fiber in there, which can keep you full. It can also help with patients with diabetes because it can help keep your insulin levels from diving straight up. It helps kind of help with glucose levels. So it is better to choose some of those complex carbs like whole grains. And we say make at least half of your grains whole grains.
You mentioned saturated fats can increase inflammation. What other foods or food aspects can increase inflammation?
So anything that has a lot of sodium can increase inflammation. I mean, you're putting a lot of pressure on your body when you're adding all that salt and those sugary foods. So I think it's kind of a big process overall. High saturated fats, high sodium, high salt. It's just not great for your body. It can cause type 2 diabetes and heart disease, which aren't, type 2 diabetes is an inflammatory disease. So you kind of have to think about that. And with saturated fats, you just want to look towards more of those unsaturated fatty acids, things like olive oils, canola oil, foods like salmon or low-fat dairy products.
This one's pretty general. I think we might have kind of answered it. Are there any specific foods to avoid after receiving a papillary cancer diagnosis, after surgery, during hormone treatment?
That's a good question. No, there's not any foods that you need to eliminate. One of the biggest things with thyroid cancer is after treatment or even during treatment is to just, change how you eat. We want to focus on a heart healthy diet. And that's the biggest thing with cancer is to prevent recurrence and to prevent other chronic diseases along the road. So there's no specific foods that you can't eat unless you're following the low iodine diet for radioactive iodine therapy, but otherwise there's no foods that or specific diets that we recommend.
This person writes, I suffer from GERD, which is gastroesophageal reflux disease as well. Are there foods that are good at managing my GERD symptoms that are also good for thyroid cancer?
So, I mean, again, there's really no specific foods to avoid, but if you do have GERD, there are some things that might aggravate it. So things like orange juice, the acid in that might cause some of that reflux. And again, orange juice contains no fiber. So if you think about eating other types of vegetables or fruits to get some of that taste, if you really want juice, go for an apple or something that's not as acidic, and it also contains the fiber and the natural sugars and the nutrients. Things that can also cause GERD are spicy foods, overly spicy foods. So focus more on things that are a little bit more mild, some mild sauces and mild spices. Coffee can cause GERD. Chocolate also usually has a lot of sugar in it, so it kind of goes along with healthy eating to avoid or limit those. And then just for GERD in general, standing up, moving around after you eat, avoiding laying down for a few hours after you eat can also help.
And someone just stated that it helped them a lot using antioxidants. I assume that's a good idea.
Is that like a supplement or just?
No, they just in general. I'm not sure if they just try to pick out foods that have antioxidant properties.
For GERD?
No, just in general.
Oh, in
Sorry.
general. Okay. Yeah, I mean, antioxidants are great. You can get those from all different sorts of fruits and vegetables. That's how we say, look for different colors and eat the rainbow.
And is there a sugar-free drink like ginger ale, et cetera, safe to consume?
It's safe, yes. So things like ginger ale, diet sodas usually have those artificial sweeteners in them. And some of the juices do too. And it's safe, but you always want to limit how much you're eating or how much you're drinking of those because they're not great for you. I mean, the best thing to drink is water. Powerades and Gatorades are, there are some low sugar or no sugar options that have those at sugar substitutes, but they also have added sodium to them too. So unless you need them, it's not something that you should be drinking every day.
This is a huge question. Are preservatives safe?
Are preservatives safe? So it depends. There's a lot of different things that people add to foods and a lot of things that can do harm in the body or cause GI issues. So I would say look for more whole foods and things that have preservatives in in moderation. You know, I'm not saying you can't ever eat a cookie again. That's no fun. And we want you to enjoy food and life and, you know, parties and barbecues, everything revolves around food. So I would say focus more on whole foods when you can. And if you have to eat things that aren't as healthy or great for you, that's okay.
I think you did address either curcumin or turmeric. This question is, I read that consumption of curcumin enriched turmeric can reduce tumor mutations. Is that true?
That is not true. I'm glad you brought that up though. It's not true. There's nothing that can really reduce mutations or anything that you eat from your diet. But again, there are some benefits of turmeric. It can act as an anti-inflammatory, but it's better for you to add it to your foods and then taking a pill, because there's no evidence that taking a turmeric pill is going to reduce any of that.
Should soy be limited to reduce interference with absorption of levothyroxine? Any other reasons to limit soy intake relating to thyroid or other hormone levels?
So I'm not quite sure about the first question, but I can speak to soy in general. I know there's a lot of debate on soy and breast cancer and watching how much soy you eat, but soy contains isoflavones and I think it's phytoestrogen, and there are no studies that directly prove that phytoestrogen can cause cancer growth. So it's okay if you eat tofu, edamame, things that have soy in them. A soy-based food, it's, you know, you probably want to avoid soy protein powders or soy proteins that are added to foods, but natural foods like tofu or edamame are okay to eat. There's no evidence that that's going to cause any cancer growth.
What is the best oil for cooking and for salads?
Ooh, this is a fun question. Any, vegetable oils like canola oil, coconut oil is high in saturated fat, so it's more used for flavors, but you would just want to monitor how much you eat. Olive oil has has that anti-inflammatory monounsaturated, polyunsaturated fatty acids. So I would say olive oil and canola oil are great for cooking. Coconut oil can be used at high temperatures. So it's a great addition if you're cooking something that needs high temperatures and you want that coconut flavor. But again, because it's so high in saturated fat, it's not something that you should be using every day. But it does taste pretty good. So
I've been struggling with my hypoparathyroidism and iron. Is whey protein something that's okay to add to my diet once in a while when I'm feeling very weak?
So it's, a lot of that is not going to be anything that you're eating. Whey protein is just another protein source. There's no, from my knowledge, anything that connects whey protein with your energy levels. I don't think there's anything that you can, eat that's going to cause a higher energy level, but, you still want to focus on good protein sources. And there's nothing wrong with whey protein, but it's not going to get you that energy, if that's what your question was.
I think that's, yeah. I am basically healthy except for my metastases, but I am having a hard time maintaining my weight, which seems to be diminishing. I eat no sweets, but I do eat a lot of nuts and dairy. Any advice how to keep my weight up?
It's a good question. I work a lot with that. So, nutrition supplements can work. Things like Ensure, Orgain, Boost, they're meant as a supplement, and they're, a lot of my patients tell me that eating is easier, or drinking is easier than eating something when they're not feeling well, or they're having a hard time with appetite changes. Those can work. Break up your meals. We're used to eating 3 big meals a day, and that can be very overwhelming for someone whose appetite is not great. So focus on 6 small meals a day, and a meal can be a bowl of cereal. It can be yogurt and granola. They don't have to be big meals. Focus on high calorie, high protein foods. Especially if you're losing weight, you really want to address that you're probably not eating enough for how much your body is going through if you are going through something. So, you really want to make sure that you prevent any further weight loss and, add those extra little snacks in between meals, which can help. And of course, if you have a dietitian at your cancer center or your doctor, they're a great resource, and we can sit down with you for longer and go through what you usually eat and kind of help you with increasing some of your calorie and protein intake to keep that weight from dropping.
What is the best sugar substitute for coffee, having in coffee and baking?
Sugar substitute. I mean, none of them really are going to increase your blood sugar itself. So you still want to limit how much you're eating. So there's really no better one. I think some of the plant-based ones, I'm blanking on it, but
is stevia the
stevia is what I'm thinking of?
Okay.
Yeah. I would say some of the plant-based ones like stevia would be a little bit better.
Okay. Are canned tomatoes safe? Does the high acid affect the lining of the tin? We've kind of talked about that.
No, it's okay. It's fine to eat it as long as there's no dents in it or it's been opened and set out for a while. It's safe to eat anything that's canned.
Iodine is important for thyroid function. Outside of radioactive iodine restrictions, should iodine consumption from salt, seafood, and the like be limited? Conversely, how do we know we are getting adequate iodine?
I talked a lot about this in my last presentation, and in the American diet, there's a deficiency is very, very uncommon because of how we eat, and a lot of salt is there's iodine added to salt, and a lot of the processed foods that we eat contain iodized salt. So, from what I remember, if I remember correctly, so you need 150 micrograms a day of iodine. That's the daily recommendation for an adult, and one slice of bread has 200 micrograms. So if that helps a little bit to think about how much you're getting from one slice of bread, and that's just a small portion of what you eat. So there's no, deficiency is very uncommon. There's no reason for you to restrict iodine at all unless you have a reason to restrict. But there's no, after you've done a low iodine diet, you can go back to eating general. We recommend a heart healthy diet, but you can go back to eating the way that you were eating before.
I was told that gluten is not good for your health. Even if you are not tolerant, even if you are not, I guess, intolerant or allergic to it. Is that true? Is it better to eat gluten-free?
That's not true. You can eat gluten. There's no reason not to unless you have a celiac disease or a gluten intolerance. We encourage you to eat gluten because it comes in all sorts of forms. It's in whole grain breads and everything. So there's no reason not to.
What are your thoughts on daily multivitamin pills?
That's a good question.
Go ahead. And then she was questioning taking calcium within a few hours of the thyroid medication, which I think is an issue, but you can address that too.
Yeah. So any medication interactions, I would definitely talk to your doctor about those just to get, the firm answer on those or the experts. But with the multivitamin, so it's kind of a debate, we want you to have enough nutrients in your body. But if you're eating an overall healthy diet and you are able to access a variety of fruits and vegetables and complex carbs and proteins, then there's no reason to take an extra multivitamin. If you're taking a multivitamin instead of eating an apple or a salad, you're missing out on other nutrients. So like the fiber and the natural sugars. So unless you need to, there's no reason to take a multivitamin. It might just be some more money that you're spending on medications or supplements. So you kind of have to think about your diet and if you really need it.
I'm pretty sure there's a lot of information out on avoiding not taking the levothyroxine within so many hours of calcium. So you have to just try to spread that out. If you take your calcium later in the day and your thyroxine in the morning, it's probably the best way. I've heard that from multiple conferences, so I believe it still stands.
Thank you, Carol. That's helpful.
One of the last ones we hear, I do try to reduce butter and use more olive oil, but I've noticed a difference in the labeling. I used extra light tasting, which seems like a marketing trick. It is more the color of other vegetables and oils, and extra virgin. I tend to like the extra light tasting. Am I missing anything by somewhat avoiding the extra virgin olive oil?
No. So let me back up a little bit. When we think about how fats, a lot of the solid fats like butter and margarine are higher in those saturated fats, but the liquid like olive oil have less of those saturated fats. So we want to think about like the, if it's the middle of the winter, your coconut oil is going to be, solid. Your butter is going to be solid, but your olive oil and your canola oil and your vegetable oil won't be. So a lot of those solid oils have a higher fat content. Otherwise, I don't know if I understand the whole question, but I think it's, you know, it's fine to use other oils like olive oil, and there's no, I guess I don't really know how to answer this question, but there's no,
I think the way that I was reading it was, is she missing out, you know, extra light versus, you know.
Yeah. Thank you, Miguel.
Okay.
No, you're not missing out on anything. It's all going to have the same fats, and a little bit of oil goes a long way too. So you just want to watch out how much portion you're using and at once. But there's no, I don't think you're missing out on anything.
I believe we got to all the questions. A few of them seem like we've already answered them with other questions. So that was quite a few questions.
Yeah, those are really good questions.
Good job.
Yeah, very rapid fire. Great job, Ashley.
Yeah.
I know, I saw like 18 questions and I'm like, I hope you can get to all of them. So
I think we got to all of them. A few of them seem repeat that are there. So hopefully everyone feels like their questions were answered.
Good. And I will say again, you know, like I said, small changes, you know, I hope you don't go after this presentation stressed about your eating habits. Try one thing at a time. You know, it's not rocket science. We don't want you to completely go throw everything out in your fridge. If you want to change to margarine instead of butter, don't throw your butter out, finish it first, things like that. But do small little changes that can make a big difference over time.
Thank you, Ashley.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone.